Welcome to Byte-Sized Agency Briefs, a webinar series that packs a ton of important agency information on one topic from one expert into a 25-minute brief. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
Thanks for tuning in. This is Byte-Sized Agency Briefs. I'm your host, Steve Guberman from Agency Outside, where I coach agency owners to build the agency of their dreams. I'm super pumped to be able to talk to Brandon Wetzstein from In8Create today. Brandon, thanks for joining me. How are you?
I'm great, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yes. So I didn't bring my Legos. They're in a bin on the other corner of the room. But why is that relevant? Talk about what you do and why Legos matter.
Well, I mean, I think step one, Steve, is your Lego should always be within
arm's reach, yeah.
As I have them all the time. You never know when you're going to need them. No, but it's relevant because what I do is I actually help teams communicate and think better. And I do this through utilizing Lego bricks. There's a method that I didn't invent. It's called Lego Serious Play. It was made back in the 90s when the chairman wanted to inject creativity and imagination into strategy. Right. Sounds pretty straightforward. And if we were having this conversation in 2004 or 2005, you could actually pay Lego to come in and teach your company how to do this. Now, to be honest, Lego's been quite successful in the rest of their business. So I think consulting is not a focus of theirs.
Right.
So they released this process to be open source in 2010, and anyone can actually go get certified to do it. And I did so about 4 years ago, and I fell in love, Steve. It's if you could have like a magic pill that everyone took and suddenly became more creative, more imaginative, they talked more succinctly, they listened better, it would be called Lego Serious Play. And so that's what I bring to organizations.
So combined between my brother and I, we have probably spent thousands of hours on the living room floor of our parents' home playing with Legos. Does that make us certified or certifiable or anything there like that?
Well, maybe
yeah,
maybe certifiable.
Yeah.
But a little bit differently. What it does is like most folks out there, I'd probably say 85 to 95% of the people that I've interacted with, it means you have a relationship already, right, with the Lego brick. And one of the things that's beautiful about this is when I start a workshop or a team building or whatever it is we're working on, there's kind of this element of anticipation. Right. And one of my favorite parts about a workshop is everyone starts with their own bag of Lego bricks. And it's a specialized bag. It's a kit that's actually made for what we call story building.
Okay.
And one of my favorite things to do is watch people and see how many actually will open the bag before being told they can, because you can tell, right? They're in that space where they remember, right?
Yeah.
Either as a kid they played with Legos or they play with their Legos currently with their kids.
Yeah.
And there's something about that touching of the pieces, of the connecting of the pieces, that just transports you to a different type of space.
Yeah.
And so although they're not certified in the method, you know how to build. And even if someone doesn't know how to build with Lego, we break them in very easily, right? We all, as it doesn't take a whole lot, right? The bricks connect pretty easily. And then what we do is we teach them how to utilize metaphor to create stories out of their Lego bricks. And it takes a couple of exercises to get the hang of this, but everyone gets it pretty quickly. The main aspect, the main rule more than anything is that the builder can't be wrong. As long as they answer the question, there's a question that's posed by the facilitator, me, and everyone builds their answer out of Lego bricks using, again, metaphor. So what that really means is the models that are built, they look like nothing. Right? They look like just some weird contraption. It doesn't look like a house or an item or an object of any kind. But there's meaning embedded in those pieces. And so when we start with some simple questions to help people understand metaphor, we get into the guts, things like, what's your identity? Right? Steve, if I were to ask you to build your identity out of Legos, your jaw might drop. And you might want to freeze, especially if I only gave you 5 minutes to do so. But what ends up happening is people are transported to a whole nother space, right? Their mind becomes all about, how do I build this idea, this thought, this opinion out of Lego bricks so that, I can utilize physicality to help explain the story? How do I do it so I'm creative? There's a level of pride and people get, really into it. But again, there's just enough time so that people can get it done, but they can't sit there all day and think about it. What's not happening is while you're building, you don't have time to look across the table and see what everyone else is building, because it doesn't make any sense to you, and it won't make any sense until they explain their answer. But it also means you can't worry about groupthink. You can't pile on to anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't kind of have that next comment, that next statement. Like, think if we're having a conversation on a similar topic, right? We always sort of have that next statement sort of preloaded. We know what's coming. We know what we want to say. With the whole Lego process, you sit, you build, and then everyone takes a moment to share their answer. So we go back to identity, right? Talking about your identity, your team identity, your organizational identity. Who are you? What do you believe in? What's your purpose? What are you great at? You get everyone's nuanced opinion because you have no idea, right? You build and then you share, but then you listen intently with curiosity and wonder, because I have no idea what Steve across the table from me built until you tell me what it means. It creates a playful experience with a lot of honesty and a lot of succinct communication.
So no matter the environment, whether it's corporate, a creative space, small company, big company, whatever, people are almost forced into finding what creativity means to them, and whether it's bringing them back to childhood play. I can't imagine there's a human alive that doesn't have Lego connection or experience. So maybe there are. I don't know.
There's a couple, but yeah, not many.
They're in Antarctica or something weird like that. But yeah, certainly not from around here. And so they get to bring their own perspective to this weird looking shape, and I use the weird in a positive way, not in a negative way, shape of things I just clicked together represents me, or whatever the other prompts are. And then my perspective gets to explain it to others so they can kind of see how my brain works and what I'm thinking and feeling. So it's very much an emotionally driven workshop that you're doing.
Yeah, it's emotionally, it's both. It's emotional and factual. It really depends on the question too.
Okay.
But one of the cool things that happens is about somewhere around 70 to 80% of the neurons in our brain are actually connected to our hands. And so when we're having a conversation just vocally, a lot of times we're mainly accessing the prefrontal cortex. Whereas when we introduce our hands in this tactile building phase, you're actually hitting all the portions of your brain, or many, many more portions of your brain. So you are getting more emotion, more things that are peeled into it. However, at the same time, while the emotion is there and it's pulling up more of your insights, more of your knowledge from your subconscious while you're building, and those ideas are coming together, when you share, there's actually less emotion because it's being externalized. It's outside of you. So I know, I think back to, I think many folks, since you're in the design or marketing kind of space, right? Design thinking being a great thing where you make prototypes, right? You want to prototype something quickly, get an idea. The quicker you can externalize an idea or thought is the quicker you get it separated from some of the ownership over it, right? I like, this is my baby, right? But no, okay. Once I make a prototype and I play and test a little bit, it's not as tied to me. Same thing is true, and this is actually used for therapy with the same method. Is by externalizing, the emotions are there when we build it, but it also gets pushed away a little bit so we can talk about it easier. So think of looking at building out strategy for the year, or what does the definition of success for our organization look like? Suddenly those elephants in the room, those things that are tough to talk about, they come out actually a lot more, and people are more willing to talk about them because once it's in Lego form, it's playful.
Wow.
It is just a toy, right? I can pull it apart and I can rebuild it, right? But I can also see it in 3 dimensions, and it becomes a lot less threatening.
Wow.
So it's weirdly both more and less emotional. It's a really good question.
Yeah, that's interesting because so by putting it into the physical form, taking it outside of their insides or outside of their voice or heart or whatever, it's not as emotional. Do you see the visible change in somebody that might come into one of these workshops and is, not, I'm not creative, I'm the accountant in the building, or, whatever that thing is, and you see them kind of break that down and kind of open up and become playful and vulnerable and whatever? Like, do you see that?
Yes, absolutely. All the time. And that's why the beginning of these workshops is the most important part of it. And don't get me wrong, the journey, like crafting, what are the questions? What should people answer? What is the order of those questions? That's definitely, whatever the objective is, that art is absolutely necessary. But those beginning first few builds, it's all about getting people in a flow state.
Okay.
Right? And that flow state is being right in that perfect space in between anxiety and boredom.
Yeah.
It can't be like so easy, like this is just stupid, I don't know why I'm here, versus like this is way too hard, I don't know, I can't build my thoughts out of Lego. Which is why my job, right, as facilitator designer, is to say like there's no wrong answer. There's absolutely no wrong answer. There's no wrong answer. And the first builds are always just getting everyone confident and comfortable with building Lego, confident and comfortable with utilizing metaphor. And even like, that first question or so building with metaphor, it's really just getting everyone comfortable so that when we get to the meat, when we get to the things where we really need the nuanced insights from everyone around the table, they've got it right there. That confidence is there. And what's funny is it grows because the teams, most teams I've done this with too, they're helping each other a lot. And, especially when you're sitting around the table with 8 people, and that's usually about the right number. You kind of want groups of 8-ish or so, give or take a few. But they'll see someone who maybe is a little bit more reserved, is a little less creative, and they'll see the model that they built, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, that's really creative, or that's really interesting. And you kind of see people sort of pump each other up on this scale, because there is truly a lot of wonder and curiosity, because again, you have no idea what someone built, and then you can say, oh, they tilted their minifigure upside down to show that they feel like they're hanging from their feet right now, or whatever it might be. And I feel like every workshop I go to, I see this coming out of so many different people, that there's like a level of, it's like permission, right? Yeah. It's like not only are you given permission, but you're given tools to just build something and be what it can be, whatever you want it to be, right? And the judgment is just, it's not there.
I think it's fascinating. I guess, is it a silly assumption that you can only do them in person, or can you do them for remote teams also?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. I try to keep the remote teams more towards individual type builds, where because once we're in person, there's a level where you can start building shared models.
Gotcha.
Beautiful. You think about buy-in, right? Things that are like vision of success, or what is the identity of our team culture. Prioritization is a really fun one to do in person too, right? You get 20 things on a table and you start shifting them based on priority and cost and impact. But when you're virtual, all you can do is build by yourself, which sounds limiting. But when it comes from a team building perspective, I think what's really being hit here is it's a combination of connection and time, right? Imagine like a 2x2 grid. The upper right-hand corner is being able to get a lot of connection in very little time. And part of that reason is because that metaphor, going back to when you're sharing your model and your metaphor, it actually takes about 10 to 15% of the language it would normally take to talk. So if one of my very common questions in a team building is build a model that tells a story of who you are outside of work. And it's a very simple frame up, right? You can answer it however you want, right? You may be into, gardening, cooking, whatever, right? Your family, it's up to you. And some people put 3 things, some people put 5, some people put 2. But what happens is it only takes people about a minute to share their model. And that's such a compressed period of time. And the model holds so much of the language that there's a lot less need for talking. And so if I were to actually put data around it, then you start saying, okay, well, if I have, let's say, 40 people doing a team building, and we're breaking out maybe like 5 groups of 8, but suddenly each question now reveals 8 insights. And if you can get through 5 or 6 questions in like a 90-minute period, right? So each group is what? So that's 8 insights per question. That's 64 insights per group of 8. Now you've got 5 groups. We're up to 300 insights in 90 minutes. That's a lot, right? That's a lot of information. But it's also giving people permission to talk about themselves, which is kind of weird, right? It's hard. Those team building, those connection point things, Lego is a vehicle that allows and gives permission to do so in a very truncated way.
Yeah, but it's not just, you're not just giving somebody a pile of Legos. The prompts and the way that you guide them, and you said you want to bring them, at this certain flow state. If you just sent me a box of Legos, I'm just going to play. Maybe I'll watch a movie at the same time. Maybe I'm, you know what I mean? So it's totally different than that. So the structure to the workshop is essential. But have you used it for things like, have you been brought in to use it for things like brand discoveries or product discoveries, or things like that as well?
I haven't yet. And I'm really excited to play, because really what this does at the end of the day is it's about gaining insights from a group of people.
Right.
And whatever that group of people might be, it could be a group of consumers. It could be a group of people sitting on different sides of the table, right? Like you said, an agency and a client group, but really getting at those nuanced insights. Because I think, and for me, this is where my love comes from for this whole process, is my background was in corporate retail for 20 years. And I can tell you one thing was consistent in the variety of jobs I worked for and all of my Fortune 100 companies, is there were brilliant people in a room, and yet somehow there was always that required meeting after the meeting,
Yep.
right? You always needed the side conversation after the meeting. And that's not because people are dumb, right? Or the meeting wasn't necessarily not run right. It's there's so many communication and connection points going on. Whereas this methodology allows, we go back to that, everyone. So you think of like, what's a vision of good? What is your vision for this brand, right? What does your vision of good looks like for this brand at the end of the day? What do you believe are the key strong points of your brand? And suddenly you can get 8, 10, 12 people in a group, and that nuanced opinion, even though they might be slightly different, maybe it's 80% similar, it's that 20% nuance that you want to really unlock, right? What are those pieces that are missing? Right, combining into a shared build of let's all put our individual builds together of shared vision of brand success and say, here's what, right, all of these pieces together looks like. Well, what's going to threaten our brand? What are the things that are going to impact us that we need to be aware of? So this is where the key and the art of the right questions come in. What is the right pathing to say, where are we now? Where do we want to be? What's going to impact us? What are we going to do about that? What do we need to look out for? And then this is kind of like that next step action plan at the end. So it is kind of a cool theory in the fact that it's a communication platform that can be really utilized anywhere that nuanced opinion is needed.
So are you the one pulling out and like distilling it into that post-event report or whatever you want to call it that says, here's what we heard, here's some things you should, look into, or like what is the outcome of one of these workshops other than it's a really fun day and you probably won't have that again in corporate America for a long time or something?
Right. It really depends. Each workshop is different, which is why most of my workshop approaches is I have a group of 15 or so kind of pre-built where everything's like 80% built.
Okay.
What I found is everyone wants something moderately built, but they want to tweak and say, here's the customizations I want. These are the pathing. So then I'll work through with whoever my stakeholder is, like, well, these are the key questions and these are the key capture points of, what we want to use this part of the journey to get to X. And this might be like, hey, these are the key levers of our brand of identification. And it may not be me capturing. Sometimes I might have someone facilitating with me that may be in charge of capturing. Sometimes it might be someone on the stakeholders team that's like, okay, yeah, you're going to capture these pieces. A lot of times it's usually like that build all the way up to the end. And it may be something as simple as simple guiding principles, or these are the 5 things we need to look out for. But the journey, is really the important factor to get to that space. And I think that journey is just like a customer journey, right? It's you come in, you look at, where you are now, where you want to be, what's going to get in the way, what an inverse might look like. There's all sorts of kind of fun games you can play with that to get people's minds. Again, you want them in a separate space outside of the day-to-day, outside of I need to answer 5 emails. It's about transporting them to a new location, to a new mindset, new mind space, to really get into where their mind is and all of their key thoughts that need to come to the table.
Yeah, I think it's freeing up their perspective to speak more freely without even knowing that they're doing that, because the Legos, the toys, or whatever are kind of translating for them. And like you said, it uses 15 to 20% less words by using kind of metaphorical design. One of the biggest challenges that I've heard in the agency space, at least over the past couple of years, thanks COVID, is culture. Whether agencies have since gone remote or were remote and people's lives are just kind of in upheaval. Are you using this for kind of culture drive, not culture drive, but culture building exercises for in-person or remote teams?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Both.
Yeah.
And it's one of the first workshops that I started working on, that I started doing. And it's probably one of the most popular ones, because when culture is such an interesting thing, because it's both intentional and unintentional, right? I think I read, I'm trying to remember which book I read where it says a company doesn't have a culture, they are a culture.
Yeah.
And so you have the intended, you have the words on the wall, but then you also have the stuff that happens, and that's all part of your culture, like it or not.
Yeah.
And then, so what usually most of the time is it's defining, right? And whether it is, wherever we are, however we got here, we're at this point right now, and we've made a decision as an organization of we want to impact our culture for good. And a lot of times that might mean we need everyone to have a voice in what this means, what it means to them, what it should look like, and how this comes to life. One of my favorite workshops I did last year was for a company that was planning on doubling in size in the year. And they had all of their values outlined. They weren't like perfect. And they even said, like, we're still working on they really wanted to define them a little tighter. They're like, we have the gist. Like, here's roughly the outline. And so we took 8 different groups, and each group had their own value assigned to them. And then each group was comprised of people from various departments. And they would build models that would talk about what the value, that specific value meant to them. And then they would build models that would talk about how that value came to life for them. And then each group would take their individual models and they would meld them, a little negotiation, a little play, to one singular team model. That's it. And that team model was translated into a story based on the elements. This is how this comes to life for us. And so with that group, there were, I want to say, 7 values, and each value had a singular model with a story that was brought together by everyone in the organization. And so in that organization kept all 7 of those models. I have to check back with them because they said they were going to get plastic cases, but they still have them.
Yeah.
And they have the stories that were built around them, right? So there's kind of this key point of like, this is who we are. And they wanted to make sure they didn't deviate from that as they doubled in size. And so they had these artifacts and these stories that were built by the whole company to show that and to amplify how important that was to them.
So they came into it thinking, all right, we're going to build we're coming into doing a team building exercise. We're coming out of it with this unknown. We didn't even expect this, but now we've got these stories based on these models that people from various departments work together on. Those people might not have ever worked together on anything in their entire careers before, but now because of this, they've all intermingled, and the outcomes are far beyond what they ever expected. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. And it plays into like this. I like to reference back because part of Lego Serious Play is it's a communication methodology, and it's work. It is work. And I do love, and this is also why I love what I do, because it comes in and it feels like play, and it is play, but it's still work at the end of the day, right? You're still talking about challenges at work, where you're headed, what's going to get in the way, but it feels so playful. And there's a book out there called Play by Dr. Stuart Brown, I believe.
I thought you were going to say by Dr. Seuss, but okay.
I wish it would have been a much more fun read. This was a little more academic, but a little more backed in science, I think, than maybe Dr. Seuss. But one of the coolest aspects of play is there is a diminished consciousness of self, right? Meaning this thought of who we are and how we look in the space and how we're viewed is pulled back, right? And I don't want to. I'd love to say it's completely eliminated in these workshops. Anytime you're in a work environment, there's always going to be a little consciousness of self. But I do believe it is greatly reduced, and I think eliminated for some people, because there's all of group dynamics. This is the thing that we're fighting, right? We're fighting hierarchy, we're fighting ego, fear, right? The extrovert that dominates the conversation, and the introvert that, you know what, I'm just going to check out of this one. You need all those voices at the table. Maybe you don't feel like you have enough domain expertise in whatever topic is at hand. This just gets rid of that. And when you're playing, you're bringing your true self forward. There's a quote by, I want to say it was Plato, that says, you can learn more about a person in an hour of play than a lifetime of conversation. And it's because when you play with someone, they think about when you've played either sports or cards or games or anything, there's just this level of bringing your full self forward, and it makes it a lot easier to connect and to work together. So when these people are building, when these teams are building these models together, it's a lot. It's rarely combative. I've never seen where someone's like, no, I want my piece to go in this. Like I've never seen that, right? I should knock on wood. I'm sure I'm going to eventually, but
Report
they're
back.
all working together to build this model of like, hey, right, we've all done this. And then there's a level of pride. Like, this is us, this is ours, this is our story. As similar to, I believe it's called the IKEA effect. When we build something with our own hands, we tend to take more pride in it. I've seen this come to life where people are very, very excited about the model that they've built together.
I love it, man. It's super exciting. I want to switch gears real quick. Before I do, I'm just, like I said, I'm blown away by what you're doing. And I think the impact that it has on teams and processes that would have otherwise been flowcharts and God knows what else. And so I love it just on all levels. I'm going to switch gears. Last couple of minutes, I like to do a quick rapid fire, unrelated to what you do for a living. What's a quick lesson that you pulled out of last year that you're bringing into this year?
Oh, wow. I think rely on others a lot. I think as being an entrepreneur and a solopreneur, honestly, for over 3 years now, Last year, I was very, 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 very blessed to meet a lot of wonderful people. Steve, you're definitely included in that list, who have helped point me in directions and just show me different ways to view things, to learn things. There's so much out there to learn. Another quote, and I'm sure this is attributed, I'll have to find out who, but right, as our island of wisdom grows, so does our shoreline of ignorance. And I feel like that is so true. I'm like, I've done so many new things in the last few years. I'm like, oh my gosh, tell me someone who knows more about this area or X or marketing or taxes. You're like, yeah, I can figure it out, but I'll sit here for weeks. I'm like, no, like really, right? Play to your strengths and then find help for the stuff that you're not good at as soon as you can.
Love it. What's business or otherwise related? What's a podcast or a show or something that you're binging these days?
I really get into the Knowledge Project with Shane Parrish.
Okay.
I think it's the Knowledge Project. Am I saying that right? It's they're very long, they're very deep interviews, but I find them extremely worthwhile. I normally don't like long form interview. I feel like because then the nuggets are so far apart, but I feel like I'm constantly pausing and I walk and listen, and I'm like taking notes all the time. I'm like, I need to look this up, I need to look this book up, or this is a quote I need to get back to. So I found pound for pound, I feel like I get a lot of insights and a lot of ideas out of it.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for your time. I hope you make time to play with your Legos today. I'm sure you will. Hope other people do as well. Again, thank you very much for joining me. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks again for tuning in to Byte-Sized Agency Briefs. As always, if you found value in this episode, chances are someone else will too, so please share it with your network. Also, if you know someone with expert knowledge on a topic that agency owners would love, drop me a note. Let's get them on. Finally, find someone to hug today.